I have to come to terms with this. And finally I did, while pastoring the Church of God of Prophecy in Santa Ana, California, a Pentecostal church. That's where I came to terms with myself, finally as a gay man. As I said, when I looked in a mirror, after reading 2 books that changed my life, I said out loud for the first time in my life, "Troy Perry, you're a homosexual." And when I knew that, it was though a great burden, that's the only way I can describe it, rolled off my shoulders. And I knew then that whatever came now, I had to make a stand for myself. I had to come out to me. And I did. And I remember when the church threw me out then and told me I had to leave the parsonage. In the middle of the night, they tried to get me to. And I said, absolutely not. My wife and I have not discussed what we're going to do, and I'm not going to do that. And so I frightened them because they expected that they could scare me out. And I said, as soon as I can sell the furniture in my home, then I said I will be willing to leave. Well, quickly he got church members together to buy my furniture to get me out of the house. And my wife and I talked, and we decided we would separate. She moved back to Iowa with her mother and father, who were Pentecostal pastors. They could only equate my behavior with demon possession. You know, it's always demon possession. You know, evil spirits. You know, and I've always loved watching people sometimes who do this. When they disagree with anybody in America, the Pentecostal church, it's demons automatically. Whether it's the president, whether it's Congress, whoever it is, or the president they don't like. Now, they love George Bush. I don't. Let me let you know now. So if you're anti-war, give me a great big hand. I can remember, as I wrestled with me, I think Mary Jane said, and it's really the truth, coming out is a layered process. It doesn't happen all at once. I ended up, as I again told the people in Singapore, I ended up going to, being drafted into the U.S. Army, served with distinction during the Vietnam era, ended up stationed in Germany. I always love to get out on a bicycle, go visit all the Germans, just like I've done here. I love people, so I love to talk to people when I have the opportunity and to speak to them. Philip and I, we traveled together, and we've been together. I want you to meet my partner, Philip DeBleek. If you haven't, stand up. Philip, back there. He came out of the closet in high school when he was 14 years old. It was hard back then for 14-year-old kids. He ran away from home. His mother told me stories. It was very funny, and he did too, that when he met me and I said, I want to meet your mother. See, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm not going to play games. You know, I fell in love with you. Now I want to meet your mother. And Philip was very smart. He took a videotape that was produced by our church, that our church is using in membership classes, called God, Gays, and the Gospel. And Philip took, it was his mother's birthday, and we had went down to where she worked, and he said, Mother, I've left you some birthday presents at home. And he said, we will come back tomorrow, and we will pick you up, and we're going to go out and take you to lunch. And the next morning, we went and picked his mother up, and his mother very lovingly said, I watched the tape last night, and she said, I cried all the way through it. In the tape was the story of a father who sent me a letter saying, I murdered my son. And he said, I despised that he was a homosexual. I rejected my son. When I read the police report of how my son was traveling over 80 miles an hour when he headed his car into a tree and killed himself. And he said, I will be ashamed of that for the rest of my life. And he said, well, I no longer take comfort in the church I go to. I want to help support yours. And he included an offering. Well, his mother saw that. And she had tried to wrestle with Philip's homosexuality. And so here I am in the room, and I have to admit it tonight, there is a difference in our age. Philip was an adult when I met him, but there's 24 years difference in our age. And my mother, when she found out I was serious about him, she said, he's too young for you. And I said, Mother, he's the same age you were, and my father's the same age I am when you two got married. I was never that young, she said. I said, oh, yes, you were. And so with Philip's mother, when we go to the restaurant, after she says all that, finally he left to go to do something with my assistant. And when they did, it left his mother and I alone. And I looked at his mother and I said, Joy, I want to tell you something. I'm in love with your son. And I promise you I'll never do anything ever to hurt him. I'll only promise you two things. He will always have a roof over his head, and he will have food in his mouth, because that's what God promised me. That's all. And so that's how our relationship started. And Philip had told me, Mother has hated every man I've ever brought around her. If she knows they're gay, she just doesn't like them. And finally, when I got up and left the table, and my assistant, we had to make a phone call, Philip's mother said to her son, now I like this man. So I'm saying to you, sometimes we learn in life about our Christian walk that the truth will set us free. That's the first thing. The truth will set us free. I made up my mind when I finally came out of the closet, and it was after I was thrown out of the church, after I had a job, and I moved in with my mother and father. When my wife and I separated, they said, come up here, come into Los Angeles, we live below there. And then I looked for a job. Do you know what it's like to look for a job when you're a former pastor? It is next to impossible. And I looked around, I tried to find work, and finally one of the department stores in LA hired me for Christmas. And a gay man who was the head of display, which means the people who make the windows look very pretty in all the department stores. Those are almost homosexuals, I can tell you. It's probably too real. And my boss was a gay man, and it was real cute, you know what I mean. But he found I was not artsy-craftsy. I was not good. I was a homosexual who had fell somehow. And I was not good at that. But when they discovered, when they put me in a division to sell something, I could sell. And so all at once, that became my claim to fame at my job. He can sell. And in the middle of all of that, I kept coming out. My boss got more and more concerned, because finally the day came when I told him, I'm going to form Metropolitan Community Church after a suicide attempt, in love with a person who didn't love me back. And I thought that was the end of it for me. My church had told me, God hates you. The scripture says, God hates you. And so I took the attitude, okay, God, don't bother me, and I won't bother you. Just let's call it quits. And I'm so thankful to this day that that is not how God works. And I've got to tell you, after my suicide attempt, and I told this story in Singapore also, I'm just trying to cover ground right quick before I open for questions and answers and we talk about scripture. But I've got to tell you this, that I found very quickly in the middle of a hospital room after the doctor had sewed up both of my wrists. And a woman had came in and got my attention, and she used God language that I was used to, and she pushed every button on me just by asking some questions and telling me, isn't there somebody you can talk to? Just look up. And when she left the room, I prayed, and I said, God, I ask forgiveness. I committed the sin in Romans 1:26-28. Not the sin of homosexuality, but I'd made my partner God and had put him on such a pedestal, and now God has collapsed, and here I am. And when I finished that prayer, I felt that joy that we Christians talk about. All at once, there it was again in my heart. I felt a joy. And so the next morning, my roommate took me back to home, and he said, are you going to be okay, or should I stay home from work? And this was not my partner at that time, but my roommate. And I said, yes, I'm going to be okay, you go to work. Willie Smith. And so it was interesting that when he left, I started thinking about what happened the night before. And immediately, as I thought about it, that joy, as I played back the night before, that joy was there. And then I stopped and said, wait a minute, God, this can't be you. You can't love me. The church has told me that. They say the Bible says that. You can't love me. And I always witness, I have all my life, on national television, every country I go to when I've been on TV, I always tell the story because I tell them, God spoke to me in that still small voice in the mind's ear and said, Troy, don't tell me what I can and can't do. I love you. You're my son. I don't